Joanne had recently put out a video exposing one of the many apparent motivations behind the war in Iran. It's a great video, definitely give it a watch if you haven't seen it, but there's one teensy little problem with it. She introduces dispensationalism, which I will give my own breakdown of in a bit, and explains what they believe and why they believe it. That's all well and good. 10 out of 10, no notes, Slay Queen. She also says the belief comes from not understanding or reading the Bible. This is true, but the problem is she never actually explains what's being misunderstood and going unread, which is kind of a big deal when you're trying to demonstrate how misguided and dangerous it is. But it's okay, Kami Mommy, I got you. I will pick up the slack that you left behind so the 100 of people that click on this video will have a better idea of how bunched they should allow their panties to become about this particular justification being used for us to be at war. So, about dispensationalism. Dispensationalism is an offshoot of the Christian faith that is really excited about the end times prophesied in the book of Revelation. Now, most dispensationalists are primarily concerned with evangelism and spreading the goodwill of Christ, so when God calls people home, they're ready. The main difference between it and Protestant beliefs is that Armageddon will happen any day now, and we need to be prepared. The problem is, panic about the end times tends to make people more susceptible to people who claim to know something about the end times. So there are a lot of offshoots from this offshoot that often break into full-on cults. And among these offshoots, there are groups that feel they have a moral imperative to make the end times happen. Basically, biblical accelerationism, the Asmongols of alt-Christianity. You know those Jehovah's Witnesses that come to your door? It's not them. It's the people donating to their churches and telling them to send the witnesses to your door. It's the people that travel the nation doing spiritual healing while getting to know very powerful people and often finding themselves in very powerful positions as a result. For every Jim Jones, there's 10 Paula Whites, current spiritual advisor to the president, by the way. Fun fact for both the Christians and non-Christians watching, it is the book of Revelation, not Revelations. Fun for the Christians because now they can avoid outing themselves as not having read the Bible when they talk about the Bible, and fun for non-Christians because they can out hypocritical Christians that haven't read the Bible. Everyone wins. It's not easy to be this much of a people pleaser, but it's my cross to bear. Anyway, funny thing about the book of Revelation, at the end, Revelation 22, Jesus explicitly tells John, who is tasked with conveying the prophecy, that anyone who adds to the prophecy will be cursed by the wrath of God. You may be wondering why that's relevant. Well, that's because dispensationalists use what's called the Schofield Reference Bible, a version of the Bible that adds interpretations to the Bible. Are you starting to see the problem? Again, for most dispensationalists, what I'm about to talk about doesn't apply to them. The Bible is the primary text, and those interpretations are just useful bits of commentary to help contextualize it. However, it's those additions that the Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, and Pete Hegseth of the world are referring to in the book of Revelation to try to convince the administration and active service members to fight in the holy war they want. They believe that a third temple will be built in Jerusalem, Armageddon will happen, and Jesus will come down to save all Christians. Let's point out a couple of fundamental flaws in the logic. In Revelation 21, John explicitly states that when heaven and Jesus return to earth after the initial Armageddon, there is no temple. God and Jesus are the temple. Second, the thing that's cited as to why they believe building a temple, despite that, will bring Jesus back is an addition to the book that says, don't add to this book. So, let's break down how stupid this is. These people have a belief from the Bible that isn't in the Bible, that the Bible explicitly says is not the case because Instead of reading the Bible they are citing as the reason why they believe this, they read, and that's giving a massive benefit of the doubt, something that was added to the same section of the Bible that says, do not add things to this section. Even in Revelation, the war that's fought between the forces of heaven and the devil, can you guess which side people fought on? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't the good guys. All of the good people set out the war and waited for it to blow over, while all the bad people, described as kings, merchants, ship captains, the unrepentant, cowardly, unbelieving, vile murderers, sexually immoral, those who practice magic, idolaters, and liars, joined Satan and his two beasts to fight against heaven. These people who, to reiterate, are only an offshoot of dispensationalists. If anything, dispensationalism is more of a convenient facade for their actual beliefs, want to cause that war. The actions that result in the war are literally described as satanic in the Bible. The people currently pushing for this war are overtly Satanists according to the scripture they're using to justify it. They want the US to be the unholy city of Babylon that calls on the rest of the world to fight on behalf of the devil in Revelation 17. They want the US and all of its inhabitants to be crushed under a giant boulder that eventually, literally, becomes hell. This is the reason they are actually giving to active service members as to why they should ship off to another country to not only kill, but lay down their lives for another country, not the US. That is, to put it mildly, a more ridiculous casus belli than you can find in mythology, let alone history. And the kicker, there are no real holy wars. There have easily been millions of people throughout history, and likely in the near future, that have fought and died in what they were told were holy wars. But not once has a war actually been waged to destroy evil on behalf of any god. The Crusaders fought between Christians and Muslims. You know what we still have? Both Christianity and Islam. French War of Religion and the 30 Years' War. Well, Protestantism and Catholicism still exist and have actually been mostly getting along for a few hundred years since. The Taiping Rebellion was fought to overthrow the Qing, not Buddhism, and they failed. The Cathars of the Albigensian Crusade may not have even existed. Jihad wars fought between Shia and Sunni were fought between Islam and itself. Islam won. And the Great Turkish War was to decide who would call themselves the Holy Roman Empire. Results were inconclusive. All of these so-called holy wars, without exception, ended without the eradication of the apparent evil forces the people who fought them were told was their divine mission to achieve. Wars are fought for any number of reasons, some justified, some not. But when it comes to so-called holy wars, as long as there are people decreeing them, it's never actually about faith. More often than not, the end of the thing they're told they're fighting against and the reward of the thing they're fighting to achieve do not come to fruition, because that was never the actual goal. War is fought until the desires of those who started them are fulfilled, extinguished, or compromised on. The irony in all of this is that is exactly what Revelation was warning about 2,000 years ago. People exploiting faith, bastardizing it to convince people to do things they know are wrong and that their faith explicitly condemns, and using that as a means to mobilize the populace of that faith to an end that is antithetical to their beliefs. We have thousands of years of hindsight on this.